What's going on, y'all? Chuck Down Face here, and on the table today I have this beauty right here. This is the Strider and Knives Jibble 2 or J2. So this is a continuation of the MSC Jibble. I believe it was only done as an MSC Mick Strider custom. Part of that division, and it's on loan for me from a friend of mine on Instagram, Loser32P. I'll go ahead and link his profile in the description. He's a big Strider fan, and he was kind enough to let me hang on to this for a while. I've had it for over 2 weeks now, and I've been carrying it some and kind of checking it out and learning what it's all about. I've taken it apart, I've sharpened it, and yeah, ready to talk about it a little bit. So, jumping right into it, the J2, or Jibble 2, J2 from Strider Knives, is a CPM 154 blade, as shown right there. Got the tiger stripe pattern, so it's a black oxidization that they blast off, they bee blast or sand blast it off, so the blade comes all black, but then they'll bee blast the stripes in there, or whatever they use. So it's got their typical tiger stripe, then it's got the flame anodized titanium handles. The blade is 4 inches long, with about a 3.5, a little more than 3.5 inch cutting edge, all belly cutting edge. It's going to be 9.5 inches overall, so it'll give it a 5.5 inch handle, and it weighs 8.5 ounces. So it is a pretty thick frame lock folder. Pretty beefy. No skeletization inside the scales. And so it's just a couple of slabs, lock bar cutout, and hardware, of course, and then that big blade too. So a little different on the hardware from typical Striders. So instead of having the proprietary Strider pivot and slotted key in there, they've got just a regular Allen key that you use, and then T10 standoff, or T10 screws for the standoffs there, and it's just a couple of standoffs, boom, boom, right there. Pretty simple. We'll do a couple of size comparisons real quick. Let's see. Here is the Ontario Rat 1. So it is much bigger than the Rat 1. And the Spyderco Stretch 2. Very similar in size to a PM2. This one in K390, so it's going to be much bigger than that one as well. Let's see, just for grins, there's that Native 5, so it dwarfs the Native 5 pretty cleanly. And you know, I've actually forgot to use the Sebenza the last couple of reviews I've done, but there's the Sebenza 21 right there. And so it's going to be bigger in blade, bigger in everything than Sebenza 21. You're kind of getting the sense that this isn't exactly a small knife. It is pretty hefty. Here is the Strider Knives SMF. And that's that proprietary hardware that I was talking about. It's got kind of the slotted key. You don't necessarily need to have a special tool. This one I actually did. I ended up getting a tool for this one because the Loctite was so bad I couldn't get it loose with anything else. So I actually ended up getting a tool for this one. Yeah, right there. So it's going to be bigger than the SMF as well. So yeah, it is not small. Definitely not small at all. Oh, and here, just for grins, a Medford Knife. Honestly, these two are very similar, very comparable in overall dimensions, with just the difference being the thickness on the Medford Knife right there. It's going to be thicker all around for the TFFH. But yeah, and it's going to be heavier as well. This one's over 10 ounces. But this one really reminds me of this one. And this is, honestly, this is one of my favorites. I don't know, I really like this Medford right here. But anyway, I digress. So I've had it for a couple of weeks now, probably about 2.5 weeks. And I've been carrying it. I did some work with it. Overall, I mean, these are going to be very hard to come by. I think the list price on these directly from Strider is going to be about $775. So they're going to be more expensive than your typical SMF offering or S&G offering from them. And then on the secondary, they're going to be even higher. So, I mean, on eBay and stuff like that, I've seen these well over like $1,300 on eBay. So they're not selling for that much, but people are listing them for that much. So, yeah, they're typical Strider markup, but there's one thing that you can say about Striders. They hold their value and they tend to go up quite a bit on the secondary. But in any case, without kind of getting in the weeds here, really nice blade profile on this. Really lends itself to doing a lot of work. So the ergos are a little funky on it. I mean, this is it's not exactly a neutral handle. You know, it's not your Chris Reeve Sabenza handle there where it's very neutral. It is definitely, it guides you into doing something. So I have fairly small hands. My hands aren't huge. So I found that the best way for me to hold it would be kind of getting 2 fingers in that groove right there and then wrapping the others around like that. But you can still definitely feel that hump right there. Okay, and then there's just this flat part right here. So the ergos are interesting. I wouldn't say it's uncomfortable, but it's different. Very easy to choke up on this knife though. So if you're doing finer work, this choil right here, 100% functional. I mean, Strider knives, they love their choils, you know? So, I mean, like here on the SMF, you can definitely choke up on that very easily. You know, it's not an SMF video, but you kind of get what I'm saying. So it's very comfortable in this position right here if you want to use it like that for finer work. It definitely is. You know, any sort of reverse grip, really it did not happen. Maybe a little bit like that, but for a draw, pull cut like that, really not designed for that. However, it is good in a chopping motion. You can grip it like this back here, and you can chop really well with this. I had a dead hibiscus tree in my front yard that I ended up cutting down, and I processed the tree with this. And I was just using it to, I mean, it wasn't big. It was, you know, if you know a hibiscus, it was kind of a braided, it just died over the winter, and it was kind of a 3 braided trunks, so to speak. And I just was kind of hacking into it, and I was cutting the branches off and all that. And I was using it very much like a small hatchet or a machete, and I was just chopping with it like that. And it does great in that regard. You really can. It's very versatile in that regard. So it's certainly, you know, not a lightweight, easy EDC, but it can definitely be done. I mean, I like bigger knives anyway. I mean, I'll carry the TFF, no problem, with the right type of pants and stuff. I wouldn't carry something like this in dress slacks, but, you know, in jeans or, you know, khakis or something like that, you know, a good pair of pants, you're going to be fine carrying something like this if you like bigger knives. This one does have an aftermarket LBS on there. So that's going to be a Graze Precision. And it, I mean, obviously it works fine. The regular one is just going to be a raw TI, maybe a polished TI, kind of like the hardware here. So, you know, that's just a little bit of an upgrade right there. I do like Graze. I actually have it on this one right here too on my SMF. I like his work right there. And so, yeah, so it's definitely a very capable, very good knife. The action on it is pretty good. I would still say this is in the breaking in phase, but I wouldn't say it's broken in very easily. You know, the owner of this knife, he had it and he used it and everything else, and he kind of had it adjusted too, and he tightened up the action before getting it to me. You know, so it wasn't all dropped shut or something like that. But I fiddled with the action quite a bit, trying to get it to a place where I was happy with the action, and also I wouldn't have any sort of lock play, or not lock play, but blade play. So kind of getting into that a little bit, you know, since I touched on it, it does have a bit of a side-to-side play issue. All right, so not when it's locked. When it's locked, it's going to be fine. You're not going to feel really much of anything. But if you take, you know, the pressure off the lock bar, you're not going to see it on camera, but I can feel it. It's got a side-to-side movement. And you can make it go away. If I tighten the pivot down quite a bit, I can make that go away, but the action really suffers. And it's not a quick flippy knife anyway, but you kind of have to decide, at least with this model, or this particular example, you know, what is going to be important to you. Do you want to have, you know, absolutely no play, or do you want to have a good action? To me, that's a negative, because I really like to have a nice, solid, tight action, or tight lockup, no side-to-side play when I take the pressure off the lock bar. And I also like to have a good action with it. you know, and this Medford has it in spades right there. So does, you know, this Strider, this SMF. There's no side-to-side play when I take the pressure off the lock bar there, but it's still nice and smooth. You know, very flickable. Of course, I'm not doing it on camera, but anyway, it's got a nice action to it. So what I ended up doing today was I ended up kind of taking it down and cleaning it, and it had some grit in there and everything else. And so I took it down, I cleaned it all off with alcohol swabs, and, you know, got all that kind of old dirt and grease out of there and everything else. And I just put a little CRK white lithium grease on it when I reassembled it. Actually, I even ran the washers along some on my strop a little bit and kind of smoothed those out and polished them a little bit, and then just added a little bit of that grease. The washers on these are very small. The pivot's really big. It's got a thick diameter pivot, like all Striders, and so they use small washers. So the washers are about the size, maybe a little bigger than a dime, but they're perforated, you know, the hole in the middle to accommodate the pivot. You're only left with just a very small portion of actual washer that's going to be making contact with a blade. And it's the same on the SMF. It's not any different. And with a knife like this, I don't know if it would benefit for a larger washer or something that Chris Reeve does, where they do custom style washers that kind of lock into place and they're cut real nice for it. Or, and I think this is an easier fix possibly, that requires less design and less engineering. I think doing these dome pivots might have been a miss on this design. These small dome pivots. Strider does, if you're familiar with the brand, oftentimes they'll do, I don't have a good example on the table right now, but they'll do the external stop pins that are just, they look like plain bar stock, and they're just cut flat, and they'll meet flush almost with the side of the knife, with the side of the scales. And you'll get more contact on your scales, whether it's, you know, a titanium scale or a G10 scale, whatever it may be, you'll get more contact on there. And I think this model would have benefited from that. My friend Satu Dave, who's got a YouTube channel, he talked a little bit about, you know, he had one of these and his had some wobble too. It wasn't as tight as he wanted it to be. And he's a machinist by trade. And he ended up, rather than sending it into Strider, he ended up just kind of doing it himself and putting in that bar stock, drilling it out and putting it in a larger piece, and kind of machining it the way that he needed to, and it's rock solid right there. So I don't know. I think that might have been a design miscue on this one. I think it really would have benefited from a larger external stop pin and not this dome style. I mean, I guess you could still go with a dome if you went with a larger diameter. I don't know. I think that's just a little bit of a miss. Another thing, one of the things that's so great about this knife is it's just all belly. So it's really great at cutting, really great at slicing, got a big sweet spot for chopping. But that being said, when you look at the knife, you have this knife with big belly, and then you've got this flat going down here on the other side. So when you close the knife, I'll just hold my finger right there. I can actually feel the knife against my finger. And I'll see if I can show that on camera. It comes, that gap is pretty wide, and that blade comes really close to the edge of the scales. And so if you're putting your hand in your pocket like that, if you keep anything else in your knife pocket and you put your hand in there, you can definitely get the fat and the meat of your palm or your finger in, and you can definitely touch that blade. This blade is really easy to touch. I mean, I can touch it without even trying. That sweet spot of the blade right there. So this part of the blade right here is very close to the edge of the scales when the knife is in the closed position. So that's not ideal. Now, I haven't cut myself or anything like that, but I mean, I know they're going with a design. You know, they're and the original Jibble may have had the exact same thing. They look very similar. I've never handled one of the original Jibbles, but bringing this up a little bit more would have solved that if they had just kept this a little bit higher, added a little more meat to the back of this. because I don't think taking down the blade and giving it less of a belly would be a good design choice at all, but maybe bringing the scales up a little bit would. So that's something that's not great about this. I mean, overall, I think it's a really cool knife. I definitely like it. I have a hard time recommending it. You know, I mean, if you're a Strider, diehard Strider fan, you're going to be trying to get one of these. You know, it goes without saying that this is definitely on your list of things to pick up. You know, you've had your SMFs, you've had your SNGs, you know, maybe you've got an AR or a GB or something like that, or a PT, you got all those different knives and you really want something else. You're probably going to do your best to try to score one of these. And so it comes in, you know, this flavor right here, which has got the stripes, and then the flame anno handles. And then it's got a plain stonewash version. So you're definitely going to be trying to get one of those knives. I get it. I completely get it. Maybe you're looking at this and saying, you know, I've had a SNG. I wasn't really into it. I've had an SMF. This looks really cool. I want to try something like this. You may love it, but you know, you just kind of got to keep a couple of those things in mind, that if you're going to prepare to spend, you know, top dollar on something like this, just know that I know of two examples, the one here and then the one my friend Satu Dave has, that do have a little bit of problem with blade play, unless you really crank down on the pivot, and then you've got a very, very stiff action, where basically it's thumb out only or give it a really hard wrist flick. So, you know, you kind of have to factor that into your decision-making process. And then you also factor in the fact that, you know, you've got this exposed blade right here, you know, that's less than ideal. And, you know, this had a little bit of lock stick too, but it's gone away. You know, I've got a little trick on lock stick that I like to do. I'll do that in another video sometime. So yeah, you kind of have to weigh the pros and the cons on what you want to, on what you're looking for. I mean, out of these two, you know, if I were only going to pick up one, I mean, I'd go Medford all day on something like this. I mean, it's a very similar design. In fact, if this was a TFF1 and not an H, they would be near identical in thickness and everything else. I mean, they're really not that far off now as it is when you look at it. Let me put them together right there. I mean, they're really not. And a standard TFF1 is just going to have thinner scales. And so they're going to be essentially the same profile of knife. I mean, I'm not trying to do a comparison video or which one would I buy or anything like that, but just having had experience with both, you know, and one of the first things I noticed is when I picked this knife up and I kind of opened it and was playing with it a little bit, is I thought of how similar it was to the Medford TFF. And so, you know, I'm not trying to say one's better or not, but if I had to choose between the two, I would go with the TFF, but you know, that's just me. I mean, let's face it, Strider and Medford have a pretty strong relationship now anyway. So in any case, just kind of summing up, those are my thoughts on it. I think it's a great knife. There's a lot to really like about it. There's a couple things it misses on. You know, I think it could have done better with bigger stop pins right there. And, you know, some different type of design on the handle to prevent, you know, the blade from coming so close and being, you know, dangerously close to possibly causing injury on the hand. Oh, but on the sidebar too, CPM 154, I sharpened this one up too. I didn't go too crazy on it. But I put it on my KME, and this blade shaped like this is just a pleasure to sharpen. Because it's just very easy strokes all the way up. There's no different angles. It's just one continuous curve. So it's a pleasure to sharpen, and the CPM 154 took a really nice edge. I was very pleased with it. It came up pretty easily. And so I was definitely very pleased going ahead and sharpening this. You know, I took it back just a hair from factory, brought the bevel back just a touch. Like I say, it's not my knife, so I don't want to go crazy on it, bring the edge way back, but I took it back just a little bit, and I think it came out really great too. So yeah, that's going to pretty much sum it up. I like the knife. I think it's a good knife. But yeah, it's definitely expensive. It's hard to get. And if you're going to get it on the secondary, you're going to pay over markup on it, you know, over retail on it, you know, direct from Mick Strider. So just some things to think about. Listen, I appreciate you checking out the video. I always appreciate everybody, kind of chiming in the comments. So go ahead and do that here too. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and click that subscribe button. Give me a follow on Instagram at Chuck_Nunface, and stay tuned for more. Thanks for checking it out.